Hey, what's going on, guys? B Flatten here. We're doing a guide and build video on Flak. This one is going to be specifically on Rakk Fl4k. So to get started with this build, all of my weapons have some sort of Rakk attack anointment on it. So I'm using a Becca here. This one is holding with Rakk attack. Take enemies that are damaged by Rakk attack, they take 100% increased damage for a short time. We're going to be going over that anointment in just a second because there are different things with it. I have the same anointment on my Maggie as well. And the other Rakk attack anointment that I have is the Brainstormer. So this one is 25% critical hit damage for a short time. You'll see a little bit in field test as to what that's going to do. I also have a Super Shred-of-Fire with the critical hit damage for a short time as well. Going on into the shield and things, I have a Transformer with a granting extra charge of Rakk attack, so I'm going to have 3 Rakk attack charges per action skill. I got really lucky with this recurring hex. It actually starts battles for me. Whenever I throw my grenade, I get weapon, grenade, and action skill damage increased by 25% for 6 seconds. I'm using a cut purse version of the Safeguard. I'm definitely thinking and wanting to switch this out, but I'm using it for now for the mag size and the incendiary damage for more fire damage. I got really lucky. I was doing a bunch of farms. I was doing the Trials of Cunning to try to get different Rakk pack and class mods. I had some with the 3 skill points split. None of them was super great passives on them. I got lucky with this one. This is the first one I found. It was a nice 3-2 split, but the passives were bad. I did, however, get a little lucky. I got hooked up from JoltsDude139. Thank you so much for sending this out to me. This completed my build. It has the 3-2 split that I was looking for, and it had the 3 passives that I was looking for as well. This completed my build. So speaking of build, let's get right into the build. Feel free to pause the video at any time if you want to copy down these stats. I'm just going to be going over the main ones that are super important. So I'm using Spider Ant Scorcher. I get health regen of 3% of max health per second, and I get elemental damage increased by 30% just for having this Spider Ant out. Other important ones are things like Big Game, so that hunter skill durations and effects are increased by a lot. Leave No Trace, so that whenever you store a crit, you can add ammo back into your magazine. Grim Harvest is also super important. You get gun damage and action skill damage. The Most Dangerous Game. Now on Mayhem 4, this build is specifically set for Mayhem 4. The Most Dangerous Game is going to be procced and active throughout the majority of your fights. Everything is usually a badass in Mayhem 4. Everything is usually an anointed enemy in Mayhem 4, etc, etc. This thing's always going to be active, or for a good majority it's always going to be active. So you're going to be getting your crit hit damage increased, you're going to get pet damage, and you're going to get passive gun damage. Grim Harvest is also really good. You get increased gun damage and action skill damage. Megavore is also going to be completing off the orange tree. Getting a crit, you have a 20% chance to crit on anywhere on the body. You don't have to just go for the crit spot. Super good. So we're sitting in the blue tree here. There's a few key ones in here, but one of my favorite has to be Pack Tactics. All damage dealt by Flak and their pet is increased. Additionally, the maximum health of both Flak and the pet is increased. Now on my Rakk Pack comm, I get +3 into this, so I only have to put 1 point into it for it to be a 4 out of 3 skill. Things as Barbaric Yop, I think that's how you pronounce it. Pet bonuses are increased by 200%. Things like Frenzy, you get damage stacks for increased damage based on your amount of stacks. Who Rescued Who, health regeneration. It's also going to be really good to have some sort of passive health regeneration. Really good. I have nothing in the green tree. I don't think I need anything in the green tree for this build to work the way it does. And finally, back over to the orange tree, we're going to be looking into our augments. Falconer's Feast. Whenever Flak's Rakk damages an enemy, a portion of Flak's health is restored. 7% of max health per Rakk that hits an enemy. And we're going to be doing the math on that in just a second. Flak and Load. Flak sends forward additional Rakks. So just by having Rakk attack, you get 2 Rakks to dive bomb. And with Flak and Load, you get 2 more. So we're going to be sending out 4 per action skill. Coming back to our weapon gear, we're gaining an additional charge of Rakk attack, so we get 3 charges of Rakk attack. Seeing that we send out 4 Rakks, and seeing how each Rakk have a opportunity to split into 2 more Rakks that seek out enemies, we're basically doing the math of 4 times 3. We get 12 racks per 1 charge of action skill, and we get 3 charges of that. So in total, if we use 3, we're sending out 36 racks. All of those racks will heal me for 7% of the damage that they do. As of the time of this video, there is a little bit of a glitch that not only myself has been experiencing, but many other people. When the racks split off of Rakk Pack, there is a chance, and a really good chance, to crash your game. High probability, high chance to crash your game, but this thing is just really, really worth it to keep equipped and not go back to, say, like a friend bot or any other comm that Fl4k has. Cosmic Stalker is another good one. I think we're ready to go into field test, but there's one thing we have to go over first. I did say that there was a little bit of testing and research that went into this build, a little bit further than any other build that I've ever done. It goes to the enemies damaged by rack attack taking 100% increased damage. So this 100% increased damage is not just by the weapon that is held in your hand. The way that this activates is that this weapon needs to be held for it to proc. However, that 100% damage is going to be increased by things like your melee, your guns, your grenades, anything. Additionally, I did do some testing on stream with this, and I did do testing on the Handsome Jack poster in Sanctuary. We did it on Kevin's in Sanctuary, and we also did it on Trant on Necrodefeo, just to test out to see if this works. So between me and a few others on stream, we found out that this 100% increased damage from enemies getting damaged by rack attack also applies to allies. I noticed that whenever I used rack attack, their damage, anybody who was in my co-op, they dealt increased damage. We did it with guns that were elemental, non-elemental, and we also did it with single fire pellets and multiple pellet weapons such as like the Maggie or shotguns. We tested it all out. Finally, to confirm these findings and this source, someone on Twitter that I interacted with named Jim Raven or RavenJim, he was the modder for the unofficial community patch for the pre-sequel. Thank you for telling me this. He said that in the coding, Rakk Fl4k is known and coded as Rakk Slag. And if we remember how Borderlands 2 slagged work, they just had enemies that were slagged took increased damage from all sources. Allies, yourself, everything. I'm really, really comfortable and safe to say that rack attack does 100% increased damage from everything. Now, this is Mayhem 4, just to confirm. A lot of my builds previously, I've done... a lot of my previous builds, I've done Mayhem 1, but I am going to be turning on Mayhem 4. So I do have this set up to Mayhem 4. I know previous builds, I've only displayed it on Mayhem 1, but there were a few of you that were messaging and commenting on the Mayhem 1 builds that you wanted to see Mayhem 3 and above, Mayhem 4, just to see what it did. So we're going to be testing this build on Mayhem 4, and I'm very confident in this build to be able to handle Mayhem 4. Neutral modifiers, assault rifle damage, and enemies take 25% less hits from critical hits. Don't really need to worry about that too much. I am definitely confident in this build to be able to handle it. So we're just going to be running some Trials of Cunning just to show a little bit off of what this thing does. Start with the grenade, throw out racks. We're now doing increased damage against everything.
Some days you hunt, some days you are.
As you can see, on the normal enemies without shield, this Maggie's just like 3-tapping most of them. Once I get an opportunity to full send against, say, an armored or shielded enemy, we will do that. Okay, so here's a shielded enemy. Not even using any of my anointments on anything. Not even using racks yet. We're still at full health. We're still at full shield. We're not really threatened by too much at the moment. Okay, so here's something that requires a little bit of attention. Now, I'm doing critical hit damage to him quite a bit, but those are also being reduced by the Mayhem 4 mass modifier. Now this is one of Fl4k's weaknesses, and I'm glad that this actually came up. One of Fl4k's weaknesses is that by a lot of powerful enemies, he can get overwhelmed quite easily, thus getting rid of his shield and getting chipped into his health quite often. If I had a perfect world, I would switch out this transformer for a health rerouter. So if you get lucky to get a health rerouter, or any kind of rerouter actually, with the same anointment to grant an additional charge of Rakk attack, you might be better off in that case. We haven't had a crash yet for Rakk pack, so I'm pretty happy about that. I honestly thought I would be getting a crash by now. That fire dot damage ended up taking me out pretty quickly. Alrighty, so that was the first clear. I'm going to switch over to my Becca that has the same thing as my Maggie, the same anointment as my Maggie, just to show what this thing can do. So he was just damaged by Rakks, and as you can see, the Becca does just as well as the Maggie does. Maybe the Maggie does a little bit better, but it's still nothing to sneeze at all. So once we get a nice good group of enemies, we could test out the other things. Oh, I might actually be dead here. A big thing that this build really relies on and really requires is the Rakks, which is why I have my shield to give me an additional charge of Rakk attack. I noticed that having 2 charges was not quite enough on Mayhem 4. And that was just numerous rounds of trials of cunning to figure that out. Using the shock shredded fire, not even using Rakks, and it shreds off HP pretty quickly, or shields really quickly, I should say. Now the Brainstormer, whenever it is chaining to other nearby enemies, every single beam of lightning that comes through, all of that has a chance to... all of this is going to have a chance to proc to get ammo back into the magazine from Leave No Trace. All of it has a chance to get more ammo back, so you can constantly keep firing that thing if you're lucky enough for Leave No Trace to proc when you start firing and shooting it there as well. I just realized that was there. They also do a lot of damage to Fl4k, and once Fl4k gets a little overwhelmed, things can go a little bad for him. That's where the Transformer Shield doesn't really come into play, or is really handy. If you don't have a rerouter, I'm sure that a stopgap would also do just fine. Having 3 charges of Rakks, you can tell that the Rakks are really spawning very quickly. There is one thing that I am not a fan of at the moment. We did talk about Rakk Fl4k, the class mod, being able to crash your game. It's also seeming that head charge, the one that whenever that you have an opportunity to get some action skill cooldown rate, it seems that that has an opportunity to reset your cooldown on your action skill itself. Meaning that whenever you activate the action skill, the Rakks, there is sometimes an opportunity for it to completely reset, and you have to wait even longer for your Rakks to come back. That really damages this build a lot because, like I was mentioning earlier, this build really needs the Rakks. If you don't have the Rakks, you don't do damage, you don't stack your annoyance, you don't do your damage. That is a major problem. Oh boy. The only other thing I can really mention that I'm not a big fan of is whenever I'm in fight for my life, Spider Ant has a chance to get in your way, and you can't exactly shoot through your spider ant. You kind of just have to maneuver around, which could ultimately screw you over and end up getting you killed. Overall though, this build is really solid. I think that it is Molly 1 takedown acceptable and viable. It would make for good damage. It would also make for good support. It would really support an Amara very well, considering that the Rakk damage does transfer over to your allies. So that made me really happy to find out that that was true. The calm on the first chance, first drop. I don't have any nades, so I can't really stack my nade anointment. But that's okay. Tink of Cunning isn't too threatening or hard. As you can see, it bosses well, it mobs well. One thing that I did notice is that whenever the racks split, it seems like all the additional racks will go after the same target. I don't know how accurate that is, because it's really hard to tell and see which rack is going where, considering we're throwing 12 racks out in one shot. But someone did mention and tell me that the split up racks go after the same target as the first rack initially hits. Only an XZ41, no rack comm. If you are looking for the rack pack comm, you have to do this on Mayhem 4 or kill Wotan on any Mayhem. Has a 2% chance to drop, so good luck. It's not going to be... definitely not going to be a first chance drop or anything. I think that's really about all. I think we covered everything. Again, once again, this is a pretty well legendary rack pack with all the passives and how it just lined up. So thank you, Jolts Dude, for sending this over to me and helping me complete my build. That is going to be all until next time. Thank you guys for checking out the video. If you want to see some of these builds being made and put together live, I do stream on Twitch 5 days a week. I do it from Tuesday to Saturday at 5:30 p.m. CST. Tuesdays to Fridays are going to be my dedicated Borderlands days, where we're going to be throwing builds together. We're going to be testing theories out, and ultimately just trying to break the game the way that it wasn't intended to be broken. So I hope to see you guys there. My name is B Flattened, and I'm signing on out of here. Take care, guys.